Thank you, Ben. Good evening, everybody. I apologise we're a couple of minutes late, particularly those of you who are joining us remotely. That's trying to cram too many meetings into a single evening. But we're here and we're ready to start. So we have a full agenda for Cabinet this evening. I'm not aware that we have any apologies.
No apologies.
Thank you. So we have the minutes from our last meeting on the 12th of December. Those have been circulated. Does anybody have any comments or amends that they wish us to take account of? Because if not, then I'm going to look for a vote to approve. So no comments or amends. All those in favour, do we have to somebody propose them? No, thank you. All those in favour of approving the minutes, please show. Okay, carried unanimously. That's fabulous. Thank you very much. Item 2 on tonight's agenda is the usual members' interests. Are there any members that need to disclose an interest, a disposable pecuniary interest? Councillor Ferguson.
It's not pecuniary, but it's worth mentioning that for the Great Gransden item, I am the county councillor for that division.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ferguson. That doesn't preclude Councillor Ferguson from voting, I'm assuming. Thank you, just so that we've got that clear. Thank you. Okay, then let's move us on then to item 3, which is the climate strategy. And we're expecting a report on the climate strategy for adoption by Council. Councillor Davenport-Rae's issue.
It is. The reports before you are the result of many months of work by council officers. Excellent work, I feel. And I'm just going to point out a few elements of it for you and then explain what the proposals are for us to agree. First of all, our work on climate through this strategy has 2 aims. One is to reduce the council's own emissions to net zero by 2040. But the second is to use our position of leadership to encourage our residents and businesses to take their own climate action. So the first of those objectives we have a lot of control over. The second of the actions has the possibility and the potential to have a much greater impact on the area in which we are operating. And I would remind you back to the motion that we passed recently at council about the links between climate and the cost of living. And so this isn't just about cutting carbon. This is about helping to protect us and our residents from some of the fluctuating prices in energy that we've seen recently. So through this strategy, we can tackle these challenges in 3 ways. The first is by taking action ourselves on our own activities. The second is by enabling action by others. And the third is by influencing others and trying to what decisions they might make. I would draw your attention to page 36 of your pack of information, which outlines the 6 objectives of the climate strategy. Looks like this. There's 6 objectives. And so you may wonder, where have these objectives come from? Well, they've come directly from us asking local people what they think. So in early 2022, we conducted a survey and asked local people what are the number one thing, or what is the major thing that you think your council should be doing to address these challenges. And that led us to these 6 objectives. I would also draw your attention to page 39 of the strategy that shows the trajectory to try to get our council to net zero by 2040. It looks like this. I think this is possibly the most powerful part of the strategy, but also, importantly, the most flexible. Let me tell you a little bit more about that. The red line gives us an indicator by which we can judge our performance annually in terms of reducing our emissions. The green line is, based on current technology available, what we hope the pathway is that our council will follow to achieve net zero in 2040. So the red line and the slope of the red line is, because it's linear, it has a slope. And so we can give ourselves intermediate targets all along the way and each year decide how we're operating. The next thing I'd like to draw your attention to is on page 41. It's called the hierarchy of actions. It's the sort of rainbow stack a hierarchy. This is really the backbone of the climate strategy, and it emphasizes the points that we have to reduce consumption and waste before moving on to the idea of investing in renewables, and perhaps then creating our own renewables, and then after all of those ideas have been exhausted, only then coming to contemplate, do we need to think about offsetting? There were some questions in scrutiny about offsetting, and I think this strategy makes it quite clear that that's our last choice. And there are many things that we can be doing and our residents and businesses can be doing before they arrive at that choice. So Appendix 5 is the detailed work plan of what our council will be doing. So this is the Climate Action Plan. That's page 61 in your pack. And this action plan has been developed alongside all of the managers throughout the council, so sort of co-created. And so each of the operational elements of our council will have these actions in their work plan for the years to come. There are 3 priority actions. The first being review our assets for energy efficiency, then developing a plan for renewable energy usage, and a fleet review. So those are the top 3 that we think should be a focus of our priority in the short term. And you will see many actions, a page and a half of actions there. Being on that page doesn't mean that they haven't already begun, because a lot of this work is already in process. I think I'll move on a bit and talk about scrutiny. So this strategy has been through scrutiny. And if you look at section 5 of the Covering Officers report, that's page 23, your pack. I was really happy with the level of engagement and interest in the strategy at Overview and Scrutiny. A lot of really fantastic questions that show just how much interest all of our members have. In fact, we had both scrutiny panels come so that they could all be involved in the discussion. And hence, you have over 3 pages of comments in your report to summarize what we spoke about. But there were 2 pieces of feedback that I wanted to address directly. The first is, it has to do with, there was a real cross-party concern that the £100,000 reserve, which it mentions, which is intended to accelerate climate projects, that perhaps this was not sufficient. So that was feedback I was getting from both sides of the chamber. And so this is the reserve that service managers could use to apply for researcher work that's required in order to make grant applications. And so in response to those concerns, when the budget comes forward in the next political cycle, I will actually be proposing that this is increased to £150,000 as a reserve, a one-off reserve. So that will be reflected in the version of the strategy that goes to council, if we approve it. The other scrutiny point that I would want to address is mentioned in section 5.25. So after our discussions, scrutiny concluded that they would like to propose an additional recommendation to council. So before we discuss that, I would just go back to what the recommendations are that are before us today. One is the official recognition of a climate crisis and ecological emergency. The second is the adoption of this climate strategy. And the third is the adoption of the Climate Action Plan and the annual review of that action plan with the help of our communities. So external people who live here, businesses in Huntingdonshire, environmental groups, parish councils, in that annual review to decide, are we still heading in the right direction? And is that green pathway still as it ought to be? At scrutiny, they decided they would like to propose an additional recommendation, and this is the wording of it, to establish a set of measures against which progress and timescales can be monitored through regular reporting to Overview and Scrutiny. I think that the crux of this feedback and what they're concerned about has to do with that regular reporting to ONS. And so I believe that we do have measures of progress that are built into this strategy. So we have the trajectory against which we can measure every year, and we have an action plan with dates by which those actions should be accomplished. But I think we could add a recommendation around that regular reporting back to ONS. And this sort of ties in with some work that officers and I recently met with the Overview and Scrutiny Climate Working Group and had a very productive conversation with them on how we might work together through this whole process. And I think they could play a very good, important role in this process, and they're just forming up their terms of reference now. So I would actually propose that as a cabinet, we add a fourth recommendation, but different recommendation. And this is what I will propose, that we recommend the annual reporting of progress to Overview and Scrutiny and more frequent collaboration with the Climate Working Group to provide focused scrutiny on specific climate actions. And I can read that out again for Habiba's use. She's got it. Okay. So just for the avoidance of doubt, that the types of reporting that would come back each year to Scrutiny and to Cabinet would include any drawdown of that accelerator reserve, an updated carbon assessment and where we are in the trajectory, progress against climate actions, reassessment of the climate actions, and then also feedback from our outside stakeholders. So those are the things that we brought together once a year to Scrutiny and to Cabinet. Are there any questions? I'm happy to take questions.
Are there any questions, colleagues? I know lots of us have been involved in this journey for a long time. Councillor Sanderson and then Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. I was at the scrutiny panel meeting and I thought the report was superbly presented. And I thought the panel were very good in the comments and questions they came up with. I just got a couple of three minor questions. On 3.3, just wondered if we received any results yet from the climate conversation and residence survey. 4.2 mentions, I think strategic fuel is the phrase used to deliver council services. Would that mean there's more emphasis on electric charging? And would that result in a reduction to rural services? I think that was also raised during scrutiny. In fact, I think it's mentioned at 5.12. And finally, have we had any feedback from National Highways from the County Council on the tree planting on the A14, which Tim Alban, I think, highlighted at scrutiny?
Thank you. Councillor Davenport-Ray, are you happy to respond?
Yes. So your first question was around the residence survey. So this survey occurred in this time last year, so 12 months ago. And so we do have all of the results. And in the climate strategy, and when you see the blue area on each sheet that has sort of a quote mark, all of those statistics come from that feedback from local businesses and people. So for example, one of the pieces of feedback was 77% of the local people who responded said it was very important or essential that we take action on climate change. So we do have the results, and that is what has led directly into what our 6 major strategy points are. Your second question was about fuels. Yeah, I think you're referring to section 4.2 talks about decarbonizing the council's fleet and investment in alternative fuels. I think this recognizes that as a district, we have a statutory duty to collect waste, collect black bin waste and blue bin waste for our residents, both in cities and in rural areas. But we do need to make a plan for the future. So that leads to one of the actions that's in the action plan around undertaking a fleet review. So given our statutory duties to collect black bin waste and blue bin waste, we need to have a plan in place so that when those vehicles need to be renewed, how does the fleet manager make that decision? How does he weigh up the different options of the embedded carbon of the vehicle, what type of alternative fuel or electric it's going to use? So it's planning for the future, but understanding that we do have a duty to collect waste from rural areas. Your last question was about the A14 and trees. I'll talk a little bit about that, but I know that Councillor Taylor has a little bit more information on that one as well. So in the County Council has a new tree strategy, and part of that tree strategy is that in autumn of this year, they're going to undertake a tree canopy survey, and that includes all of the verges along the highways as they're the highway authority. So once that's completed, then we will know much better about the survival rate of the trees along the A14, and that will enable us to move forward on what we do next. We understand how many have survived. But I would also say that in terms of biodiversity, we might want to think about our trees, the things that we want to plant in place of them. There are occasions where shrubs and hedgerows are good carbon sinks, and they might survive at a different rate in different locations. So yes, I'll feed back more about that as it becomes clear. But I think Councillor Taylor may know a little bit more.
Thank you, Councillor Davenport-Ray. Councillor Taylor?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we at County Council, we had a motion submitted by Councillor Murphy at our full council that stated residents of Longstanton and Girton believe they can hear the A14 more than they did before the upgrade because many of the trees were dying, which this then builds into the concern of Councillor Auburn on the overview and scrutiny. Martin Edwards, this is a reply we've got back from County Council regarding the trees. So Martin Edwards at National Highways said that the replanting strategy has been finalised and following an update on the current position. So what they're saying is that National Highways' first objective is to ensure that they have learned everything they can from the previous replanting on the scheme. They fully appreciate the need to think differently on the basis that if they do the same thing again, it's likely that they will get the same outcome. Martin is working closely with David Hamilton at South Cambridgeshire District Council, who agrees in principle that they do need to take a different approach. They're saying to better understand the failure rates, National Highways have now taken soil samples of over 20 sites across the project. These sites are in areas where the plant survival has been both good and poor. This will enable National Highways to better understand which species have had the better survival rate, together with the associated soil condition. They also appreciate the need to consider each location and if there are any other contributory factors that might have an impact on the survival rates, such as prevailing winds, use of plastic sleeves around the plants, fertiliser, weed spray and agreed maintenance regime. Once they've completed this exercise, they will match the most successful species with soil conditions. It sounds very technical, this, along the project. They are also planning inspection periods so they can monitor and record growth rates. They're looking at doing this between September and March. Now, I do believe it wasn't from the previous September, so I think it's going to happen this September. That they're very conscious that we may have a really heavy summer again, like we did last year. So to give the plants the best chance of survival, it will be September all the way through to March.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. I very much look forward to seeing the results of that, because I appreciate that the residents who are experiencing tree loss, not only is that an issue for us in terms of our environmental and ecological systems, but I also appreciate for residents who value what that does in terms of impact of the new development. So thank you. Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. Like several Cabinet colleagues, I sat through the debate, overview and scrutiny on this as well, and quite agree with Councillor Sanderson as well as Councillor Davenport-Ray that it was one of the most, I think, positive and constructive and frankly kind of uplifting discussions I think I've witnessed in recent times in this council. The measure of cross-party support and the challenge in large part around needing to do more and invest more, as you've touched on. So I thought that was really helpful. One of the beyond what you've touched on in presentation, one of the closest points to disagreement at the panel of a very soft variety, I think, was the discussion around carbon offsetting that you touched on, and I think both for reasons of our need and obligation to take responsibility for what we do as a council, as well as our district, as well as, of course, the concerns illuminated again in the press over the past week following investigative journalistic reporting around how much efficacy there is, how much reality there is behind carbon offsetting. I think the hierarchy in our strategy, page 9 of Appendix 1, absolutely puts it in the right place, which is last, as you indicated. So I'm very, very supportive of that. I was going to raise the question around the additional recommendation because it strikes me that there is so much work here across so much of the council beyond. As we said, this isn't one part, one sort of green climate team in the council, but it's about embedding its work. There's so much going on that I think that there is a risk of creating an industry of reporting around details in here. But I think your suggestion as to how we capture the gist of what the panel were looking to achieve strikes me as pragmatic. So if you feel that's helpful as you've outlined, I'm very happy to support with that additional recommendation. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wakeford. Councillor Pitt?
Thank you, Chair. So Councillor Wakeford's beat me to all of the points you've made there, so I'll just agree with him on all of those. I'd just like to add that I'm really excited to be part of council that has brought this strategy before us. So thanks to you and all of the team, all of the officers that have been involved in it. I'm delighted that it's evidence-based, but it's also ambitious. It breaks down a really complex challenge into something that's, I think, palatable and meaningful to people. As you know, I'm really keen that we, embrace this challenge at pace, but at the same time, we need to be evidence-based, and I think it gets that balance really, really spot on. It's great that we've got cross-party support for it. I think we have to also acknowledge we're not always going to get it right. As we tackle these challenges, there are certain things that will be more successful than others, and that's okay. But I think, the direction of travel is really clear, and I'm really excited to support this. Thank you.
So I think I've heard a proposer from Councillor Wakeford and possibly a second from Councillor Pitt. Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
So yeah, firstly, I fully support this. I think it's an excellent piece of work. I just wanted to caution against this idea of linear decline, though. So we've been through this at County Council for a few years, and we do track our carbon emissions regularly. And sometimes they go up and sometimes they go down for unexpected and often economic reasons. So if we're going to report this regularly, as the additional recommendation is suggesting, we have to be just aware that it's not always going to be good news. This is a difficult thing to do, and there's also going to be some diminishing returns. We're going to do all the low-hanging fruit first, and as we get closer and closer to that point where we offset, it's going to get more and more difficult. So I'm fully in favour of reporting regularly, but I just want to set expectations that it's not going to be an easy journey and it will never be linear. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. I think that's a salutary reminder that it's the journey we're on, but the steps that we take may be somewhat surprising as we head downwards to where we want to get to. Thank you. Councillor Davenport-Ray, is there anything else you'd like to say before we move to look at the recommendations?
I just want to thank all of the officers who have put effort into this strategy, not just in the direct writing of it, but every service manager that has thought about their plans for the next year and how they might be able to contribute to this work.
Thank you. And I'd like to commend my thanks to all of you. I remember being in the chamber when this was proposed originally before in the previous administration, and it was requested by one of my group at the time, could we achieve this in 2022? And the answer was no, it's not achievable. We may be into 2023, but this was completed in 2022. It's going through the process. I think what has been achieved to get us to this point is nothing short of remarkable. But the big prize is what is the journey we're on. So can I thank all of the officers and you to get us to this point for something actually which didn't seem practical and feasible, and yet it's been done. So thank you. So we have before us this evening then some recommendations. I'm going to ask officers, is there any reason why we shouldn't take these on block? Is that suit councillors? Are you happy for us to take them on block with, sorry, Councillor Davenport-Ray?
Perhaps we could ask Habiba just to read out again my suggested fourth recommendation that's not printed.
Yeah, okay, so the recommendations before you are the three on page 14 of your agenda pack, with the addition of recommending annual reporting of progress to overview and scrutiny and more frequent collaboration with the overview and scrutiny working group.
Thank you. So we have a proposer, we have a seconder. All those in favour, please show. Okay, so carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you for your report, Councillor Davenport-Ray. That then moves us on in the agenda to the place strategy update, and this in fact is me reporting back. I'm very pleased to be joined by our officer, but Kate McFarlane actually has very little voice this evening, so she tells me it's me in the driving seat to give the report back. So I'm going to cover that report, and then I'm very happy to stop and take questions. Cabinet, many of you have been involved personally on this journey over the last few months. I think it's a really exciting piece of work that we are able to be part of. And for those watching who have not yet quite caught up with what the place strategy is about, it's about setting our agenda for the next 20 to 30 years. What will Huntingdonshire be like in 20 to 30 years' time? What would we like it to be like? What could it be like? What might it be like? It's a very visionary piece of work. It's very different from a lot of things that we have done in council previously, because it is a long-term view, but importantly, it is not the district council's strategy. We're an enabler and a facilitator of the strategy. We're a convener. We have brought residents, communities, businesses, public sector, private sector together to have this conversation and then to try and capture it in order to create a strategy, a vision of where we are heading and how we might know if we've got there. Because it is forward-looking, because it is really quite challenging, it will outlive the lifetime of this administration. We are part of that journey. So there's some similarities back to the conversation we've just had around climate. We are part of that journey, but we will by no means complete that journey within the lifetime of this administration. We are heading out on a journey. I suspect, Councillor Ferguson, it certainly will not be linear. It probably will not be by car. But we are on a journey. So what you have before you is an update. Some of the things I wanted to just highlight and draw to your attention. When we took over in May, this was already in train in the sense that we were intending to do this piece of work. You'll remember that when we've talked about this at full council, we talked about the value that we place on engaging with our residents, with our businesses, with our communities, to make sure that we are listening to their thoughts, their ideas, their suggestions, and then we're responding from that. And again, there's some similarities to the work around climate. We are listening and building from where people are to where people wish to go. The engagement has been considerable, far more than, in fact, I think we envisaged when we started this journey, because so impressed were we by the nature of those discussions and the enthusiasm that came out of those conversations, and the keenness of people who'd heard about them to get involved. And that continues. So whilst we are reaching a phase where we're reporting back, those discussions, that engagement is ongoing, and our commitment remains very much at the forefront of everything that we do. But just in a summary, we've talked to nearly 70 organisations so far. We've held a number of stakeholder workshops. We've been out on social media trying to reach people through the ways in which they normally are used to communicating. We've talked with 489 residents individually so far. I'm really pleased. We've talked with 147 children and young people who are not constrained by all the difficulties of what is difficult to do and are full of enthusiasm for all the things which are possible, which always reminds us to stay in the art of the possible and not be constrained by, but how will we actually do it? And some of those things are the things that I think from time to time we need to come back and get excited about. We've involved our towns and parishes, we've involved the voluntary sector and the third sector, right across all of our community groups. We've engaged with businesses, and there is still work to be done, because every time we finish a phase of engagement, somebody says, but I want to be involved. You haven't yet spoken to me. So long may that continue. We will keep talking to people right the way throughout this journey. This is not the end of a conversation, it's the start of an ongoing dialogue. So anybody watching this who is anxious to get involved, our online engagement is still very much available, but it's an ongoing dialogue. Out of that, we've heard some very clear messages, and they are in your reporting from 4.2 onwards. And from those messages, because otherwise I will get all excited and we'll be here all evening, from those messages, we've distilled them down with the help of the process we've been using into 5 journeys as a way of trying to articulate all of those visions, all of those desires, all of those things that we want to achieve. Now, those 5 journeys are still evolving. And that's the beauty of a place strategy. It will continue to evolve with every conversation we have, with every idea, with everything that changes around us in our world and our environments. And that's the challenge that we grasp, but it's also where all of the opportunities come from. So within those journeys, there are some what ifs. There are 1 or 2 slightly controversial things, but actually I think that's great because it grabs everybody's attention and makes people say, really what we mean? Is that really? But they're not our parts of the journey. They don't belong to HDC. And in fact, we've worked very hard not to shape them through the political process. We've simply tried to reflect back those conversations. So that's where we've got to so far. What we're now pulling together for you is, if you like, that formalised place strategy, so that actually we have something that says this is where we're starting from and the journey we are going on together, with a view that it is owned by everybody who's participated so far, and it's something that everybody who participates in the future recognises and is able to engage with to take us forward. So all of that said, where we are at this point in time is to look at that strategy, to think about where we go next with it, and then the real challenge is, what can we implement in the first part of our journey together through this joint administration, through this council? What can we work with our partners to influence and shape? What can our partners run with, our businesses run with? Because actually they can look at this and say, actually, do you know, we can do that. We can lead on that. So this is a jointly owned piece of work. Just coming to some of the comments from overview and scrutiny, which again were positive. And there was lots of thought around the things that were in the document. Councillor Pickering, quite rightly, was grabbed by probably the most controversial statement in the document. What if the car was a relic of the past? And we discussed what that might mean and why in some communities that's quite a radical thought, because in some of our communities there isn't alternatives to the car. It's very difficult to walk from A to B. It's very difficult to get around by bike or mobility scooter or by bus or by train. And one of the real challenges for us is, how do we make that alternative viable active travel a reality in all of our communities, not just those that maybe are more urban, where it may be more common, and how do we look at those particular challenges as they apply right the way across Huntingdonshire? So we assured Councillor Pickering that we were not necessarily suggesting that we would no longer have cars, nor would we support our motor industry, would no longer support our motor industry, who are innovating, but that actually we wanted people to have choice and flexibility and to think about what forms of transport they might use for different activities and for the different parts of their lives. You'll see that we were being asked specifically about the really big challenge ahead of us, which is that our lead officer, Kate McFarlane, is going to be leaving us. She's not going very far. I'm pleased to say she's going only to the Combined Authority, where she will be a useful champion to work alongside. But we were able to reassure the panel that we are going through a recruitment process. We are confident we will get somebody that can lead it with the enthusiasm and commitment we've had from Kate, and who will adequately and admirably take us into the next phase. But Kate, they won't be you. I feel obliged to say that publicly. I'm sorry to embarrass you, but I know that we will get somebody who will do a good job, and that is key in that recruitment process. There were some reservations around what was realistic and what wasn't. I think one of the really big challenges around this strategy is we are used to working in an environment as a council where we quantify everything because everything is within our control. The PLACE strategy is about working within a devolved system. It's working across systems, and it's working smart with our communities, our businesses, the public sector and the private sector. Together, we can achieve far more than any one part of us can do on our own. We will never have the resources to do everything we aspire to and residents wish on their own. But collectively working with the system, we might actually go a very long way on these journeys. And as I said, it's not our strategy, it's others. So this is quite a change from the sorts of things that have been before this council, perhaps previously. So I think that broadly reflects the comments around overview and scrutiny, and I say I've covered about that facilitating and enabling role. So I'm going to stop there. I'm very happy to take questions or comments before we then look at the recommendations and the items to note from this report. Are there any questions or comments from Cabinet? Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. I was reflecting as you made reference to 6.2 in the report, the reference to Councillor Pickering's question. I suppose the implication in the line there, what if the car was a relic of the past, is the private car perhaps, which makes it no less radical a statement, but perhaps more sort of obviously implies some of the what if alternatives. But I think the reassurance you gave at the scrutiny panel, and again now is helpful about what that question does and doesn't mean. I just wanted to touch really on the aspects of Councillor Gray's contributions, as you made reference to as well, Councillor Comboy. Of course, we as a district council don't control Huntingdonshire. We don't even control all the public services and public investment in Huntingdonshire. We don't even nearly control all of it. And the limits of what we actually directly control might even surprise some of our residents. They certainly don't surprise Councillor Gray and colleagues who have run this council before. But I think there is a really important sort of philosophical point that you touched on there around what we are seeking to influence, which is beyond what we control. And Councillor Pitt referenced on the previous item about risk of not always getting things right and achieving the impacts we want, and particularly when it comes to seeking to influence activities more widely, we will not always get what we want, not even nearly. But I think the idea that a core focus of how we think in trying to deliver our residents' objectives, priorities, trying to deliver on the promises we collectively make as local councillors to our residents really does behove us to think bigger like that. So I'm very pleased that we are tackling the questions that we know we can't solve ourselves, because it's the right thing to do.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wakeford. Councillor Pitt.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a really interesting read of having been through this process with you and then seeing this document. So I've got a few observations. I think, first of all, I see this as kind of a synthesizing task, really. I'm really your words about this isn't our document, this is for the whole of Huntingdonshire, really, I think, are really important. But our role in this stage is to kind of try and turn it into a group of statements, and I think that's been done really effectively. I think the I'll get the right terminology, I hope. The 5 journeys and the 20 pathways, if I've got that right. Oh, proud of myself. So I think, you know, they're really fascinating, challenging, interesting questions that I'm glad we're grappling with. The 2 that stood out to me, reading them again today, I think it's the first one in the document, so page 90 in the PDF pack. And in a world where, so this is a negative statement really, in a world where Huntingdon lacks a strong identity, and then it goes on to say that residents, particularly younger ones, don't feel a sense of belonging to the district. I think it's quite hard to hear, but that's really important that we grasp, you know, it's not just about gathering positive stories. Actually, we need to, you know, face up to some of those negative challenges, as it were. And so I think, you know, I'm glad that we're doing that. I think the other one that really sort of jumped out at me was on page 102. And the question is, what if we stopped measuring GDP and started measuring happiness? And for me, there's something really profound in that statement, because we're in a society where we've measured GDP as the kind of like, you know, it's the measure of all worth of everything for so long, often. And actually, GDP is a measure of something else. And I think happiness is quite a good word for it. Actually, what are we here to do as a council, as a society, is to make people happier. If they're healthier, they're happier. If there's more equality, they're happier. I mean, you can go through the whole list, and I think that word happiness, even though it's a bit twee sometimes, it's really powerful. And so I think part of the synthesizing process for me is what we haven't quite got to yet is, what is my neighbour going to say to their neighbour or someone else in the pub about this after a couple of pints even? You know, what are they going to take away from this document? And I think there's a statement that we can distill this down to around that kind of measurement of happiness or well-being or whatever it is. And if we can start changing the way we talk about what we do at the council, I think that can be quite inspiring for other organisations. So I think we're in a really good direction of travel. What I'm hoping we can do still is to kind of really distill it into those simple terms that anyone on the street's going to really respond to. So it doesn't feel like a council document. It feels like a new way of doing politics and society. So yeah, really excited to be where we are and interested to see where we end up next. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pitt. I think that new way of doing politics and society may well be the thing that I take away from this evening. Thank you. Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Yes, as the strategy moves into the next phase, I would just like to offer some challenge around one of the pathways that stood out to me. So on page 117, what if all of our children were fluent in sustainability? And children are smart, young people are very intelligent, but they're worried. And I think it might be much more appropriate to consider, what if all of our parents and grown-ups were fluent in sustainability? And so I would just urge some challenge and some thinking about that particular pathway going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Davenport-Ray. That certainly chimes, I think, with the conversations that have been had with young people. And I know you happen to have been in the school just very recently. And our youngsters actually sometimes are further ahead than those of us who are their parents, simply because it is something that they have grown up with and they see the world differently. And I think one of the real challenges for us is recognising that what we mean by sustainability and what we want to achieve is very different depending on who you talk to. But I noticed that the feedback you had from some of the primary age children wasn't constrained by the things of life. It was very optimistic about, well, I don't see why this is difficult. We're just going to do. And those are the sorts of things actually which are really inspiring, because it's not constrained by the challenges and the practicalities. It's about, I don't know why this is so difficult, and we don't just get on with it. So important. Thank you. Good challenge. And I think that's one we'll think about and take back. Thank you. Was there somebody else signalling? Sorry, Councillor Hassel.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to pick up on another one of the points. The what if is it was easier to live healthy. I was really privileged today to give an award to our countryside team, who do this fantastic job of maintaining our parks. And I'm not sure that every resident is fully aware of what that team does. But if as part of this place strategy we can start to expand these facilities, not only do we improve our climate strategy, our climate position by increasing biodiversity, we give more places for people to be healthy. And I challenge anyone to walk through a woods or Paxton Pits or anything like that and not to feel better after they've done so. So I think it's just recognising the assets that we've got and the potential for expanding them, I think is fantastic.
Thank you, and I thoroughly endorse that. I also, I think at the same awards today, heard about some of the work we're doing with one of our local prisons. And again, that was about health, but in a part of our community we don't necessarily see as readily. So I think there are lots of opportunities, and there are definitely things we should be celebrating. Residents, when we were doing the work around the budget and what our residents value, told us that a lot of those non-statutory services around our parks and our open spaces were things that they really valued, and they wanted us to continue to do. So I think that's, again, there's a lovely synergy between the conversations we are having on lots of different topics and how they relate and interact. And I think one of the challenges that I hope we'll grapple with when we bring forward the corporate plan, alongside the place strategy, alongside the climate strategy, alongside the budget, is actually that those linkages through, because they are all part of a suite of activities that benefit and support that bigger aim and that bigger journey. Thank you for that. Are there any other comments or questions? In which case then, the recommendations are that you note the extensive engagement and the work that's already been done. You've given us some comment already this evening. Thank you, Cabinet. But again, it's an ongoing dialogue even with Cabinet, so please keep those comments and feedbacks coming. And that you, I hope, note that this will be coming through to full council in March. It says to Cabinet in March, but Cabinet in March, then full council as a strategy that we are then in a position to publish. But can I, as this is one of our last meetings with our officer, can I embarrass her greatly? Can I pay public credit to Kate McFarlane? Obviously to your team, Kate, but you've headed that team. You've taken us through a process which is very different from many of us in our personal experiences. And I hope this is a legacy that you are truly proud of, because you should be. So thank you for all your work at your time here. I know you're not quite going yet, but this is our last one of our last public opportunities to thank you. So thank you, Kate. Thank you. In which case then, Cabinet, we move on to the next item. So we are now looking at a local plan review and a proposed update. Councillor Sanderson, I think this might be you.
It is me, Chair. It's one of 4 items I think I'm presenting this evening. So lucky Cabinet. So this report is one of 3 interrelated reports which seek Cabinet approval to commence an update to the local development plan. We're required under the Town and Country Regulations Act 2012 to complete the review within 5 years of its adoption and to reach a conclusion on whether it requires a full, partial or no update. The current local plan, which runs to 2036, was approved on the 15th of May 2019. So the report highlights the timetable for a full review, as well as the consequences for not carrying out the review. I think a new local plan will deliver our goals, it will help meet our housing targets, and it will meet our corporate plan priorities. I think another key reason for updating the plan is the change to national policy. We've already seen an uplift of 20% in calculating our local housing need, which will go up from 805 to 950, and that will apply from the 5th anniversary of the local plan in May 2024. So I think it's key that we start to progress that. There have actually been 3 new iterations of the NPPF, National Planning Policy Framework, since the local plan 2036 was initiated, and there's another one in the works which is running at the moment. So those of us who've sat on the Development Management Committee here at the District Council before the last local plan was approved will be familiar with the so-called tilted balance. If we're not able to demonstrate a clear path to achieving the new housing figures, as well as demonstrating a 5-year supply of land for development, then this could be invoked again. The tilted balance would mean that there's a stronger weight given to granting planning permission. And if the panel, for example, were to reject an application, it would make it very difficult for them to defend that and win an appeal when it goes to the inspector. So as to the timetable for implementation, if we approve the recommendation this evening, it will mean a 6-week period for public engagement. This will run from the beginning of February to the middle of March, and that will be for the statement of community involvement, and also for the sustainability scoping report, which will follow after this item. I hope that's helpful, and I'll gladly answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sanderson. For those of us who were on the Development Management Committee and lived through tilted balance, it is not something I personally wish to revisit. So I certainly would commend to Cabinet the need to get on with the local plan because it will stand us in very good stead. Are there any comments or questions that Cabinet wish to ask? I know that we've had other conversations, so I suspect that actually we've probably answered many of the practical questions that Cabinet may have had. Councillor Wakeford.
Sorry, I was anxious not to jump in first again. I think you're right, Councillor Conboy. We're well familiar with this and will need to be and expect to become more familiar over the coming months and a lot longer. I just wanted to touch on point 4.2 from the comments of overview and scrutiny. Councillor Corney's question about the effect of a new local plan on neighbourhood plans, and I think it was helpful in flagging a concern that may well exist across the district. An awful lot of time and effort is put into the production of neighbourhood plans. We have one later on our agenda, I believe you're about to present to us, Councillor Sanderson, and it strikes me as a perfectly rational worry on the face of it that revisiting our local plan, producing a new local plan, indeed, might render work wasted. But I think the assurance you gave the other evening and is touched on in the paper as well is worth unpacking. That in fact, as we've said, the real disservice to communities would be around the tilted balance that we've touched on. We don't want to revisit, but also the point that only specifically contradictory aspects would trump. So I wonder if you'd like to give a reassuring message to those towns and parishes considering neighbourhood plans.
Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Wakeford's absolutely right, and I think it was a good point by Councillor Corney about the effect this will have on neighbourhood plans. I mean, the parish has put in a lot of effort, so the team here, to make sure that they're compliant, and they do have a big impact on the local community. So I think it's key, and I think actually may have been in one of the later reports. I think Councillor Corley from Great Staunton, I think he also mentioned the engagement with parish councils as well. So I think it's important we do that. Sawtry Parish Council have also vouched to submit their and go to the inspector with their neighbourhood plan. So I think it's key that we make sure that they're aware of this and where that the new local plan will be a more current document than some of the older neighbourhood plans. But thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sanderson, if I may, from the Chair, I think given that we have a number of plans already in place, neighbourhood plans, and those that are coming through the pipeline, might we ask officers if they can provide some advice to those who already have a neighbourhood plan and to those who are anxious, simply to make sure that everybody has the same information, because I know officers are dealing with that on a practical basis, but that may actually provide some assurance, particularly to towns and parishes who are going through that process. That would be very helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely, Chair. Thank you. That's noted. Yeah.
Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. No, that is helpful, and I guess for me the important point is that it is still in the interests of their communities to be exploring and progressing with neighbourhood plans for exactly the reasons we've all touched on. Despite this work of planning for what comes next.
And there is possibly the very timely town and parishes session that's coming up imminently that may well give us an opportunity to at least flag that, and then we can do some work in the slightly longer term. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Because if not, then I'm going to move to the recommendations. So you have before you two recommendations and what I think is a to-note in item 3. So if you are content and officers don't disagree, then I would propose that we take them as 3 items on block because they're all related. In which case, do I have somebody to propose? Yeah, Councillor Pitt and Councillor Hassel to second. Sorry, I've looked in the wrong direction, so there wasn't any prejudice about who proposed to the second. It's always nice to have lots of options. Thank you, it's appreciated. In which case, all those in favour, please show. Again, carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Is this the ongoing Councillor Sanderson reports? In which case, would you like to report for us under item 6, which is the Statement of Community Involvement 2023?
Thank you, Chair. The Statement of Community Involvement will set out how we engage with the community on planning matters, so not just the local plan, but planning policy documents, neighbourhood plans, and obviously involving the community in the planning application process. This requirement to produce this report is set out in Section 18 of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004, which I'm sure we're all very familiar with. Agreement really tonight is sought for the contents of the SCI, that's the appendix, and to proceed to public engagement. We're not actually legally obliged to do this, but it's clearly desirable that we do. Important that we engage with residents, with other local authorities, with key stakeholders. So we engage and listen to our local communities, as we heard with the place strategy. I think that's a vital thing for us to do. That will help, obviously, in gathering the evidence we need. Item 4 of the report highlights the significant parts, really, of what we're doing here. And again, I'll happily take questions from colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sanderson. Councillor Hassel?
It was just a point from our previous meeting on discussion of planning. It says the public engagement will commence in February and run for 6 weeks. But I believe the head of planning was saying that we might extend that to 10 weeks. Is that correct? Or am I talking about a totally different? Sorry.
Yes, Chair, just to confirm, that's the Chief Planning Officer's ambition to extend that window of opportunity.
Thank you, Managing Director. I think it's extremely welcome. That reinforces our ongoing commitment to engagement with our communities beyond that which might be statutory. Thank you. Councillor Davenport-Ray.
I just want to double check my understanding about some of the community involvement outlined here. There's a section 3.8, who do we consult? And there's a list of some general groups that we plan to consult. It's my understanding that that is the legal minimum that we are committing to, but that if we choose or are able to go beyond that, that we would, because I notice a few groups that I would like to be consulted. I mentioned children and young people before, and our growing refugee population as well. So I just want to confirm that my understanding is correct, that this is the minimum that we legally are agreeing to commit to.
Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you. Councillor Davenport-Ray is correct. It's the minimum, and obviously we would like to go beyond that. So certainly be interested in hearing about some of the groups you'd be interested in bringing forward, so we can consult with them as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Then if everybody is content, again, we have some recommendations before us. There's a recommendation to approve the contents of the Statement of Community Involvement and to agree that we can publish that consultation, noting that actually we intend to run it for longer than the noted 6 weeks. We're intending to run it for 10. Again, I'll take it on block. Do I have a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. A seconder? Councillor Wakeford, thank you very much. All those in favour, please show. And again, that's carried. Thank you very much. Councillor Sanderson, item 7, Sustainability Appraisal Scoping Report.
Thank you again, Chair. So in order to prepare and review all the policies we need to really underpin this with relevant and up-to-date evidence for the local plan and to ensure it meets these 3 tests, which are the relevant economic, social and environmental objectives. Obviously, we want to avoid adverse impacts on these, and we may need to explore alternative objectives. And if that's not possible, certainly mitigation measures at the very least. So this really is why the assessment system used for the Sustainability Appraisal Scoping Report will be key to ensuring that we meet these tests during the local plan process, and it will obviously feed into how it will be assessed. There are actually legal requirements to this, require us as a local planning authority to carry out the appraisal of each of the proposals in a local plan. Each stage of preparation of the sustainability appraisal, including the scoping report, is required to include a non-technical summary to provide a clear overview of the process and findings. So the process comprises 5 stages. They're set out in 3.3 of the report. And again, I will happily take questions from colleagues. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sanderson. Are there any questions, colleagues? Councillor Davenport-Ray?
Yes, I wanted to ask a question about on the covering report, section 9.3. That's page 186. It says HTC's emerging climate strategy has been identified within the A1 stage, but it is, however, recognized that this strategy only focuses on the council's own climate impact. I would challenge that statement. A year ago, we spoke with residents and asked their opinions on climate, and the number one action that local people would like our council to focus on is changing planning rules for new developments. And in fact, I think the local plan is one of the most powerful tools that we as a planning authority have to enact climate action in our region outside of the council. So I would challenge that one sentence, but I think the direction of travel in this document is good.
Councillor Sanderson, did you want to respond?
That's a very good spot. I think something we can perhaps work on. But yeah, I think you're right. I think it goes wider, as you think you showed earlier on this evening. Yeah.
I think one of the practical challenges is we have a lot of emerging work all happening in parallel, and trying to cross-reference all the documents is a bit of a challenge. Thank you. Good spot. We'll make sure that it reflects our current position. Thank you. Any other comments or observations? Because if not, I'm going to be looking for a proposer, and I'm looking for a seconder. A proposer for Councillor Wakeford. A seconder, please. Councillor Sanderson, thank you very much. So we take on block the recommendations to approve the contents and to agree the draft scoping report. All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. That's carried. Councillor Sanderson, goodness me, you are going to be tired by the end of this meeting, but this is, you'll be pleased to know, the last item that we need you to present this evening. But it's a very important one because it's one of our neighbourhood plans.
It is.
So I'll hand across to you for Great Gransden's neighbourhood plan, examination outcome and progression to referendum.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we'll be going to Great Gransden, a fine part of the world. So this report seeks agreement from Cabinet to act upon the examiner's report into the Great Gransden neighbourhood plan, which would lead to a referendum on whether or not it should be brought into force and be included as part of the development plan. Great Gransden Parish Council, I think, have done a really fine job on this. They produced a submission version of their plan, which was available for comment between August and mid-October. The examiner proposed a number of modifications which have been discussed and agreed with the Parish Council, and the appropriate documents are in the 3 appendices to this report. 2.2 of the summary report puts the 3 options available to us as a planning authority, of which the first is recommended, that being that we should act upon the examiner's report with modifications and progress to a referendum, the date of which looks to be the 9th of March. If a majority of those eligible, obviously, to vote in the poll are in agreement with the neighbourhood plan, it would then come to the next available meeting of council on the 29th of March to be formally approved. And I was going to say Mrs. Lancaster, but unfortunately she won't be there. But I think Oliver Morley will then read out the result, obviously, of that poll, and we will formally receive that result. I think scrutiny were broadly in favour of this. I know Councillor Pickering highlighted some concerns that have actually come to me from Councillor West and Councillor Ferguson, who are the local members for Gransden and for Abbottsley, about the conservation area. That's not something we can do through a neighbourhood plan, but it is something that I've highlighted to the planning policy team. I know they'd like to see that updated, as indeed with the respective parish councils there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sanderson. Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Ferguson?
Thank you. So having represented Great Gransden for almost 2 years now, I've sat through many parish council meetings where this has been discussed, and I'm inspired by the amount of work and dedication that's gone into it, because I think it's a really credible document that explains very well lots of the challenges that our rural communities are facing, which is maintaining their rural character whilst providing sustainable growth, principally for the young people who grow up in the village, and often have to move out because there aren't enough houses there as well. So I think this is an excellent document. I'll be supporting it, and I urge everybody else to do so too.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Davenport-Ray?
Yes, Councillor Sanderson, you mentioned the scrutiny feedback around conservation areas, and I'm wondering how we as a planning authority might encourage many conservation areas in Huntingdonshire to be looking at their plans, at their reviews, what the definition of their area is. How might we better encourage them to do that as they, as Councillor Ferguson explained, are trying to maintain that character of their village while they grow?
I think probably, as the Chair said earlier, we have an engagement coming up with parish councils soon. That might be a good way to do that. Obviously, if they all decided to do that, that would mean a great deal of work for our team. So, but I can well see that it's something that they will be looking at, and I'd encourage them to come forward and highlight that. I think perhaps that's a question we need to put to them and make them aware of it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sanderson. Councillor Hassel?
I'd just like to congratulate the Parish Council of Great Gransden for producing a document. I've produced with a team at Buckton, similar neighbourhood plan, and I know what goes into it and how many hours are spent on it. So it's a non-trivial exercise, but I think once you've got your neighbourhood plan, you understand much more than you did before, and what's important and what isn't. So well done.
I concur, Councillor Hassel. Also, having done a neighbourhood plan in my parish, I would like to commend the work that has been done to get us to this point in Gransden, and I would like to wish them the very best when we've made our decision about agreeing to progress this. I'd like to wish them the very best in their referendum, but I'm preempting a vote from Cabinet. So do I have a proposer for the recommendation? Oh, Councillor Ferguson, you were very, very quick.
Could I also, Chair, could I just also thank the Parish Council, as Councillor Hassel said, a lot of work, no mean feat to bring this about, and also to our officer team, to Claire Burton, Clara Kerr, Francis Schultz and others for all their reports tonight. Thank you.
Indeed, Councillor Sanderson, duly noted. And Councillor Taylor, you were slightly pipped to propose it, so I'll take you as a seconder if you're accepting. Okay, so we have before us you're asked if you will agree to act upon the examiner's report and to allow this to progress to a referendum. All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much, and we wish them well in that process. I look forward to an update in due course. Just before we then close this evening, I would like to also give my thanks to the Managing Director, because this is her last Cabinet meeting with us. There will be lots of opportunities to continue to say goodbye this month, and we will suitably embarrass her, because this is not something that's probably very comfortable. but I'm slightly further away that she can't quite stop me from saying anything. I would like to just put on the record on behalf of Cabinet in this meeting our thanks to you for your service, and particularly for those of us who are in a new joint administration, a new Cabinet. Thank you for steering us so well through this phase, advising us incredibly well to get us to a point where we are getting more comfortable in role. We still have a lot to learn and we're still on a long journey. That seems to be a theme for this evening, but we'd also like as Cabinet to give you our thanks. We will embarrass you, I'm sure, at suitable occasions throughout the rest of this month before you finish your term of office.
I look forward to it.
But Cabinet, I hope you might join me. I'd like to give the Managing Director a round of applause, because I think that's suitable. And to Kate, because we didn't clap for you too. On that note, I'd like to bring this evening's meeting to a close. Thank you very much to the members of the public who've joined us in person and those who've joined us online. Thank you and good evening.